I don't necessarily think that it's doomsday for the human to human interaction. I think what it should do is allow us to do more of what we want to do in a perfect world.
All right. A wise man once said, me 5 minutes ago, that there's only one way to start, which is to start.
Here we go.
Welcome, millions of ladies and gentlemen, and anything in between. This is
Computers and machines.
Yeah, this is me, and this is my little journal of life on Earth that and all the interesting and beautiful people that I've come across who need to be documented. And you're here too,
So
Matt.
I was going to say interesting in my case.
Yeah, and then there's Matt.
Yeah, we need another descriptor.
And we can start with an apology. Would you like to apologize to all the sponsors and the millions of listeners for the because we're in such a fancy apartment in beautiful St. Leonard's that there has to be some kind of echo in the audio. It's got nothing to do with us not knowing how microphones work.
Yeah, we couldn't lower the ceilings for
you have to speak up because there's a good chance that no one can hear what we're saying.
This is probably good in my case.
Yeah. So basically, I like to start with a little monologue because you're the interesting person in this chat. But I like to start with like any real podcast, we have to start with ads, right? And in lieu of actual advertisers, which I'm sure are coming, they're knocking on the door. We're going to start with public service announcements.
Okay.
I'd like to say, don't drink and drive. It's a world full of dum-dums. Don't be one of them. Do you have anything?
No, I think I could sign up to that. I like the anti-dum-dum. Be safe.
Yeah. I remember halfway through this, we got to also stop at a cliffhanger. When you're about to say something really interesting, we're going to stop.
And maybe the disclaimer I would give is just turn this off now because Danny's not worth listening to.
All right, Bobby. If we start there, then where are we going to go here? Let's end there. Let's end with that.
Thank you for your time.
Yeah, we'll put that disclaimer at the end. So basically, my view on you do something interesting with your life, and my view about it is more or less this, and then you can react to what I'm saying and explain why the case is not that. Artificial intelligence. There's a lot of us, we pretend to know what it is. Most of us, some people really don't know what it is, and those are the people I'm worried about. They're going to be taken by the storm, and they're going to be left behind. Then there's those of us who used it a little bit for work, and maybe, hopefully, even to fix some of the audio of this episode, maybe.
Yeah.
But we pretend to kind of know what it is, but we don't know anything. And then there's those who really know, who are the people building this shit. And we have had the privilege of maybe knowing some of those engineers. And I think it's amazing that they get to do that for a living, like solve these amazing problems for a living. And it seems so cool what all this stuff can do. But at the same time, we're just going further and further away from what makes people actually happy, which is connection and community. Things like this, like just talking to people and talking to your neighbors, saying hello to their dog. Things like that actually make people happy. And this stuff, no matter how amazing, is bringing us another potentially irreversible step away from that. And all in order to make 17 people rich. And if you use 17 as a sort of biblical number, because, in the Bible, the numbers 3 and 7 and 12 repeat, but they don't necessarily mean exactly that number. They're like 3 is a few people, 12 is a few more, and, and 120 is a lot of people. So I'm saying basically it's 17 people who are getting rich from all this.
But 17 is very specific, but...
Yeah, well, yeah. Okay, 18.
They were all at Trump's inauguration, right?
They were definitely there, yeah. 2 of them were our supporters of Trump, at least. Yeah. So tell me, why is that not the case? How should we view this? And let's, first of all, what do you do?
Well, I think what I do is maybe it gives me some credibility with the audience, but I think what I should...
What do you have? So millions and millions.
Millions, yeah. What I should say before... I have to give this disclaimer, otherwise I could lose my job. So I have to say anything I talk about here is not representative of my employers. It's all my own opinion. I've worked in the cloud computing industry and the technology industry for some time. I spent the last few years at Google. I now work at NVIDIA. But again, I think the topics we'll talk about are not representative of those companies. It's just kind of my filter on things and my opinion on things. But so I think what you say about AI causing challenges for human connection, I think it is true to some extent. But I think what AI will do is amplify the importance of human connection and maybe change the things that we do together. Um, like you're still going to interact with an AI, but you still have to be able to sit down and have a conversation and, enjoy the company of other people. So I think these types of interactions aren't going to go away. What AI is trying to do is remove some of like the rote repetitive tasks from your day-to-day life so that you can focus on these high value human interactions. Um, so yeah, I mean, I don't necessarily think that it's doomsday for, for the human to human interaction. I think what it should do is allow us to do more of what we want to do in a perfect world,
Yeah.
which it's not, but yeah.
Okay. And how much trust do you have in the, well, let's forget your former or current or any future potential employers, just generally the people who will own this technology. We'll talk later in what countries they might be in the future, because that's becoming a little unclear. But there will be governments, large corporations. It's all becoming more and more centralized with them, right? Because you're buying up, big ones are buying up smaller companies, and that's
Yeah.
and it's all going to be centralized with a few big names. So how much faith do you have that they care about what I mentioned, let's say human connection and happiness?
Well, I think there's two schools of thought on who should own AI. And I think generally, like you have some people that think about this concept of open sourcing artificial intelligence so that everybody has access to contribute to the community and to consume what comes out of the community. So like, no, there's no one owner. Like you should have governments regulating how it's used. But for example, Meta is a big proponent of this, and Yuan LeCun, who's the chief research scientist at Meta, he's a really famous guy in the world of AI. He's a huge proponent of open artificial intelligence. And that's, by the way, like if you think about OpenAI, like the name OpenAI came from back when they were started, I think it was like 2015 or 2017. They were meant to be a counterweight to Google because Google was snapping up all these researchers from DeepMind.
Yeah.
And they didn't want a concentration of research and power within Google. So they were basically found that it was Elon Musk that started it, and he was hiring a lot of top researchers from Google, like Ilya Sutskever. And the goal of OpenAI was to actually open source AI technologies so that there was no concentration of power and concentration of control of artificial intelligence systems like within these big tech companies. So that, like there's one school of thought that you should open source it all and allow the community to engage with it. And then on the other side is, you should.
But OpenAI, tell me if I'm wrong, that's just an example of everyone has their number, because when Microsoft came in with a big enough number, they abandoned that vision.
Well, and they're in the process now of converting to a for-profit entity.
Yeah.
But I think that's probably just capitalism winning out, because this stuff is expensive to make. And the amount of compute power required to train one of these language models far surpasses what most people can do. There have been some breakthroughs, like, there's a Chinese company, I think called DeepSeek recently that trained a new model for something like $450 or something, or some ridiculously low amount of money. It wasn't that low, but
okay.
But the order of magnitude is, these things can cost hundreds of millions to actually train. So what ended up happening is that they didn't have enough money in compute power to be able to continue innovating, so that you have to create partnerships in the tech world, or you need to find people willing to fund what you do. And philanthropists are only going to fund so much until they get a return on whatever they're giving you, right?
Yeah.
So I think like OpenAI moving away from its kind of genesis as a not-for-profit or an open company might just be a product of capitalism or greed. You could say maybe greed, but I don't you don't necessarily want to think that these are greedy people.
Oh yeah, and that's a whole different topic. Like ambition and greed, they meet somewhere, and we need these people who are high achievers and kind of ambitious and kind of greedy, and that's they drive progress, blah, blah, blah. That's a different thing. I don't judge especially since I know some of these people personally. I don't judge the engineers or the even business people who are making big bucks from this. This is we need them to solve some problems in this world, and that's not my point. My point is maybe just in how, because something is cool and awesome and might solve 7 problems, it may create 700 on the wayside, and that's maybe the sort of cautious side.
Yeah, well, I think everybody acknowledges that this is going to bring. It can be massively disruptive to society, right? And
it will be. I do.
Oh, yeah, it will be.
I don't think we can go back from a lot of.
Well, no, I mean, I think it'll be massively disruptive to society. Like, you think of the Industrial Revolution, how it changed the labor market. You're going to see a similar transformation, with AI.
Yeah.
But I think people acknowledge that. But I think what everybody's afraid of is that AI is going to come and take my job. I think what people are saying now is that AI is not going to take your job, but somebody that knows how to use AI might.
Yeah.
At least in the short term.
Yeah.
So, right now, like, AI is really just helping as a major boost to productivity.
Yeah.
Rather than like being able to actually take over. Now, there are some functions that maybe could be entirely replaced by AI, but I think, Sam Altman said something really interesting. Like, I think it was last week, that the types of people OpenAI is hiring now are different than the types of people they were hiring like 5-7 years ago. And what he said is they're really focused on people, like what used to be valued in the workforce was people that had a lot of knowledge and information. So someone like you that studied at Cambridge, have all these wealth of life experiences.
Yeah, I forgot to say that. Should we have opened with that, Mike? Well, welcome to this brand new podcast. I went to Cambridge, and Matt was there with me. And let's clarify, but Matt did not do an academic degree. Matt did an MBA, which almost is a
practical degree.
Yeah, practical degree.
And I amassed no intelligence at all. So in this new paradigm, I'm more valuable.
No, you are. I mean,
no, but I think the reason I said that is the types of people I think in the workforce that were really highly valued were people that had all this information stored in their minds.
Yeah.
And they could remember and recite things. And so you'd say you're hiring PhDs and people that dedicated their lives to study things. And now you can just, that information that has been amassed like throughout that process of studying and life experience, I don't think it could be replaced, but the recollection and memory component of it, if it's online, granted you have issues with like cutoff dates on AI systems, like the training dates, but if it's online, the AI will likely know about it. And we're saying AI, by the way, like we should maybe.
Oh, we're going to start with that. Like, explain to the folks out there, what is a computer?
But just to finish the thought on what Sam Altman said, he basically said the types of people they're hiring now are not these people that have amassed like massive amounts of information and knowledge. No, it's people that know how to ask the right questions. And I think, if you think about academia, like, in academia, asking the right question is the most important part of anything you study, because it's the determination of what you study. Like, if you think of people writing PhDs, and we have lots of friends that did theses and whatnot.
Yeah.
If you can't ask the right question at the beginning of your degree and what you want to focus on, at the end, like the value is only as good as at what you've.
Yeah, we can do the other parts of the research process correctly, like the data collection and the analysis.
The output's only as good as the question.
If no bias about what you're answering.
Yeah. So I think this type of skill set is going to be increasingly valuable. It's being able to frame and ask the right questions, and then use artificial intelligence systems to help you get the answers to them. There's all types of like moral.
You're saying people like Sam Altman are interested right now in hiring people who can ask the right moral questions. That makes me a little dubious.
No. He was saying in terms of like the workforce that they have at OpenAI, they'll look for in hiring, and it's probably depending on the function. It's just being able to ask the right questions in your particular function. So, like, I work in business development, and an example would be, what are the right questions I need to ask to put strategies in place to be able to grow the particular business that I'm working for right now.
Well, you're not the person designing these.
I don't make the systems.
You more or less, what you do is a fancy word for selling them. And am I right in assuming that it's from big company to other big company and to governments?
No, I mean, so the company I work for, we serve all markets. Like we have a lot of consumers that use our technology.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily focus on the consumer end. I do focus on, B2B, but it should take a step back to a question about like, what is AI? Because, a lot of people today think of AI as just what they're seeing in the media and what they're using day to day, which is, language models. And generative AI is a component or a subset of AI, but it's not all of it, right? So if you think of like what is AI? AI is really just the ability of a machine to perform tasks that would typically require human intelligence. So like if you think of it as like concentric circles, the big circle AI is just the ability of a machine to complete tasks that usually require human intelligence.
That definition is very similar to just automation.
No, because automation doesn't necessarily require human intelligence. So it could, I guess, but to try to simplify it, right? So, and if you think of like back in the 1940s and 50s, Alan Turing had created this test called the Turing test. He called it the imitation game, which I think there's a movie, right, called the Imitation Game.
You've seen that movie 700 times.
No, I actually have. I have seen it once.
It's got benefit lumberjacks.
No, but so like Alan Turing had come up with the imitation game or the Turing test, which was basically the test he created to test whether machines had human-like intelligence. And that was because machines couldn't provide like a natural language audio output or speech output. It was all like written text.
Yeah.
So basically what they did is they had one human interact with a machine in written form, and then also interact with a human in written form. And then the human had to figure out which of them was the machine.
Yeah.
And so
you pass the test if it's
indistinguishable. Indistinguishable. And I think in academic areas now today, people say the Turing test is like quite simply too simple.
Yeah.
Because like language models now, you could easily say they passed the Turing test for being like, purely having human intelligence, because it is often indistinguishable.
But then if you ask, like, let's say a enthusiastic novel reader, for them, they have nowhere near passed the test for giving them an enjoyable novel. Like they would say, like, this paragraph is well written, but something's wrong here. I wouldn't want to read this book. They're nowhere near sort of.
Yeah, they don't have the creativity and like the structure and but they can be trained to be better, I think, at that. And that's something really task specific.
I don't know. And if you look at like the art, this is going very philosophical, but what really attracts us to stories like novels, movies, everything is actually human emotions that will it's the Shakespearean arc of love, conflict, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And someone gets their head chopped off at some point, right? Yeah. That, I can do, I have no doubt. But then there'll always be this, I believe another AI term, uncanny valley or whatever that term is. Like there'll always be something wrong with it.
I remember hearing something. My wife is really into podcasts, and she had me listen to a podcast. I can't remember which one it was, but
it wasn't mine.
No, it wasn't yours. Well, yours is still a baby in its infancy, and hoping to grow to
really. It's a really strong, fat, really clever baby. Think Stuart.
Beautiful baby.
Yeah, it's Stu.
It's Stewie.
Yeah, Stewie. Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I like Stewie. No, but she had me listen to this podcast once. It was like they had a language model write jokes for the Onion, so like Onion headlines. And they gave it to they gave it to comedians and said, if we turn all of the filters, the safety filters off on these models, can they actually write Onion style headlines that would be on par with like the top writers?
Yeah.
And the comedians and these writers, looked at the output of the AI, and most of them, they said, were not anywhere near the quality.
No. Yeah.
But this was some time ago too. This was probably, like 3 or 4 years ago.
When you ask AI to write a joke or whatever, they get to that smirk level funny.
Yeah.
Where they can get to that like dad log, like, that's clever, like a pun or something like that.
Yeah.
But to get to something, I don't know, just to name a few recently disgraced great comedians like Louis C.K. or or not disgrace like Dave Chappelle or something. When it comes to a whole story thing that communicates based on cultural understanding of the audience and all that, they're not there yet.
Yeah, there's a lot of nuance that, to be funny is difficult. I probably haven't mastered it, but to be like, to be able to write comedic content that people understand, and can associate with and think is funny is really difficult. Like, I think comedy is one of those things that actually, language models are not very good at yet.
No,
but I think
there's a point about being funny and languages that I always was skeptical about where these things will go, because I always viewed truly getting fluent, speaking another language fluently, is an exercise in empathy. You have to either physically immerse yourself in the culture that speaks it, or at least in your mind put yourself in the shoes of someone who is from, say, New Zealand, if you're learning Kiwi English or something, and how do they think, what's their history, what's their sense of humor. And if a machine, we're assuming, quite yet does not have the capacity for actual empathy, then how can it ever be there with jokes or with languages?
You're a linguist. Danny speaks like 20 languages, I think. It's pretty impressive. I totally agree with you, though.
But AI, even humping in more into my head.
Even though I speak English and I've lived in the UK for 8 years, like, you can't necessarily understand people and culture, like, unless you live in a place. Like, you can know how to speak a language and not understand the people that speak it.
Exactly. Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Or be it ever to make them laugh on a stage. It's just hard to do even in your own culture. But
But I think, So going back, so you've got like kind of AI. I was talking about concentric circles. So you've got AI. A lot of people these days are talking about AGI, or like artificial general intelligence, which is basically a machine that can complete any task that a human could complete, any reasoning task that a human could complete, that requires human thought. And there's plenty of academic definitions and benchmarks for AGI. And you'll see, if you look at Twitter, like all the people that work at these big tech companies are talking about, being able to achieve AGI and whatnot.
Yeah.
So I think like that's something that's going around, but like you'll hear people say AGI, and that's really that a machine can do anything that a human could do, not necessarily physically, but like, that requires thinking. And logic, reasoning. Yeah. And right now, that, like, I think people say we're on the verge of AGI, but I still think we have a ways to go with that. I think, most researchers say we're still pretty far away from it. Like, for example, a classic test for a language model today is to ask it how many R's there are in strawberry. So you could pull up Gemini and type it in, and it's like, there's 2 R's in strawberry. There's 1 R in strawberry, because it doesn't necessarily think in letters. It thinks in tokens. And so, like, a token being a word, or...
So why wouldn't letters be tokens? They literally are tokens of spoken word.
Well, what it does is the way that... So, okay, hold on. We should go back. Keep the concentric circles.
We have a circle with AI in general.
AI is big. And then another subset of that...
Yeah, little circle is
machine learning. So we start with machine learning.
And you could talk... So AGI would be a little what's that called on the testicle? The little extra bit, like a epididymis or something. Epididymis, yeah. I see. And another epididymis would be
a subset. So you
machine learning.
Yeah. And ML is basically just applying statistical concepts.
And now that's where these tokens come in.
No, well, okay. So what everybody interacts with today is, language models is a subset of machine learning called deep learning, or neural networks. And so you have like kind of these concentric circles. So ML is really just using, like, being able to have it, like, it's literally in the name. Like, it's enabling a machine to learn using algorithms and having it go through different experiences by feeding it data, and then assigning it a specific task to complete some type of predictive output. So like, machine learning is really just using like classical statistical methods, like linear regressions and that type of stuff. But what machine learning is really good at is things like prediction and classification. So like, an example of this would be, say you had a retailer, the Spar down the street. Like, how do they know how much stock they need in the store every day?
went for Spar, the most obscure German.
All right, the co-op. What's Tesco? Whatever.
Tesco, Walmart. That's international.
Yeah.
Remember, we have millions and millions of people all over the world.
So any big retailer. Yeah. So think of it like they need to be able to predict the amount of stock that they're going to have, or they need to be able to predict the amount of stock they need in the store to be able to satisfy the demands that people have.
Yeah.
So what they do is they just feed the machine a machine learning model a lot of data, and the machine learning model can do demand forecasting for them to predict, based on lots of inputs, like what's the weather, what's the day of the year, what happened last year, what happened yesterday. And so it takes all of this data and it can say, you need 20 bananas. Now, food is not a good example because it's very difficult to predict, like on food and like what you should have. But
yes,
but
this stuff, to clarify, did exist for decades. But you had to manually come out with a new upgrade or new version of the software where you had put all this new data you had collected.
Well, you were just writing. So you were just writing algorithms. Like
you were giving the software a data set, and it would give you these answers or guesses.
These are massive training data sets that you give it, and what you do is like the model learns and gets better based on like how good it is.
Yeah, exactly. So that's where machine learning is distinguishable from just old automation software we had.
Exactly.
By the fact that it can teach itself as it goes along. You don't have to come out with new versions all the time. And
but you have to continuously feed it training data and then monitor model performance, like how it's actually performing on predictions. Okay. And then you have things like called drift, but we don't need to get technical. But so that's machine learning. This has been around for a long time. It's just applying statistical methods to large data sets to be able to teach machines to do certain things.
And for someone like Tesco, Walmart, back in the day, there would be very well-paid mathematicians and accountants sitting in an office somewhere, kind of doing this manually from like stacks of paper and from all the sales figures when it's a rainy day and when it's a sunny day.
And a lot of that was all rule-based, and like it wasn't necessarily, it wasn't as flexible as an ML model was. So you had machine learning, and then like the big breakthrough in ML, I think, came, back probably one of the first breakthroughs was compute. So language models existed for a long time. And I think even back in like the 90s and 80s, people were developing simple versions of language models. But what changed is the ability to use massive parallel processing and to have the compute needed to actually like generate these systems. So like back in 2012, there was this, I forget the name of the competition. There was a competition, it might've been called the ImageNet. And it was basically they give you a set of images and you have to be able to predict, like they give you a set of images as a data set. And they want you to be able to use those images to predict whether something was a cat or not a cat. So they give you a million pictures of cats. And they say, here's a million pictures of cats. You have to develop a system that can say cat, not cat.
Okay.
And like back in 2012, when this researcher,
this was the stuff that they were talking about when we were at university, this sort of breakthroughs.
I mean, it's recent, right? This is 12 years ago, right? And this is when they realized that GPUs, or graphics processor units, could be used instead of a CPU. The CPU is basically like the brain of a computer. It controls all the operations of a computer, but it's a serial thing. So everybody talks about GPUs today, and the value of GPUs is that it enables massive parallel processing, so you don't run into these bottlenecks that you do with CPUs. But they didn't figure out that you could use this parallel processing for neural networks or deep learning until like 2012.
Yeah.
And then I think the big moment was like back in 2017, only 8 years ago, when Google open sourced something called there was a paper called Attention is All You Need. And they basically open sourced what they call the transformer technology, which enabled people to develop these algorithms or these systems using transformers. And I won't get into what a transformer is, but it basically just, it enabled language models to determine how important other tokens were in the preceding, I won't say token.
No. Keep token, because now I'm starting to understand what it is.
Yeah. So
we can listen to this 17 times until we know what a token is.
Yeah. So machines don't understand words. They don't understand images. Like machines, when you use a computer, it's just a series of zeros and ones. So when you show a machine a picture of a cat, or if you show it the word dog, it has no clue what that means. So it has to turn dog into a numerical representation of dog, which is called a vector. And so, but they're using basically tokens as a combination, I think, of vectors, and it's basically a token is a word. Think of a token like a word.
Mm.
And so what these things do is what language models do is basically predict the next token based on the preceding tokens. If you have an input that's the brown fox jumped over,
it's going to say fence. As the most
so
thing.
what it does is so what this encoder, what Google open source in 2017 was the transformer architecture for encoders. And what that enabled you to do was figure out how important the preceding tokens were to determine the next token. So it took into context the preceding tokens and used that to predict the next one. So so when you said the brown fox, like what's the most important thing in that sentence? It's probably fox, not necessarily brown or the.
Yeah.
And so it takes the weight of those tokens and it uses it to predict the next one. And basically what it does is based on the preceding tokens and the question you've asked and all of the knowledge it has of the world that it's been trained on, it predicts the next word or the next token that should be output. So the brown fox jumps over, and it assigns a score, like a confidence score to each token. So
cool. So what year did this happen then?
So this was 2017 that this happened.
That seems like, I don't want to pretend like I'm smarter than any of these people, but that seems like to put weights on different parts of a sentence or any information.
Yeah.
Seems like an obvious next step. Why did it take so long?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, think of any academic research. Like, research seems like really simple and intuitive, right? Like, I have a friend that's a professor, and a lot of the things that he studies seem intuitive, but until you actually apply academic rigor to it and verify it. So, like, it's probably that, and language models, like the way that they're done today, I think it was like that architecture that they developed, this concept of attention, like how much attention you should pay to the prior tokens in the sequence, that was important. Yeah, but I think, and AI, like, so since 2017, you've been using AI, like you've been using language models in your daily life, and you probably just don't know it.
Well, yeah, you have the most obvious example of this is something that did exist prior to 2017, but got dramatically better in recent years, predictive text, which everyone uses. So that's literally assigning weight to what you just wrote and guessing what you might write.
Exactly. So basically, like in Gmail, you had, autocomplete.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And Google used autocomplete for a lot of things. Like they first started using autocomplete when you typed a search term into a search box. It was like, if I type into the search box, the brown fox, it might suggest like what you should write as a query to finish your query. So that was used in search. It was used in Gmail. It started being used in Docs, and Microsoft might have used it in some form.
And this episode is brought to you by Google, whatever Hey Google, Gemini, whatever. Yeah, whatever the hell it's called. Yeah. By the way, just to take a little break from mentioning Google, like to my very earliest point, which is what worries me, is I remember this example. It was an NFL game this year, real football. We're in Britain, but we prefer
American football.
Yeah, we prefer it when grown men touch each other more in their games. Yeah. So I was watching, and the Google Gemini ad came up, and it was a dad talking to Gemini, like, "Hey, Gemini, help my daughter write a letter to someone." Yeah. And I was like, where is this going? Like, maybe just sit down with your daughter and teach her how to read and write. It's one of the most amazing experiences. So probably my son doesn't know how to read or write yet, but I know when he learned how to lie and tell a joke, there's amazing moments in development. And just sit down and teach her to write a letter. Why would you want some kind of AI to write a letter for her? What's wrong with you?
Yeah. Well, I think there's going to be a whole generation of people that like don't actually write things themselves. So like, think about this. Like when I was younger, like when I went through grade school, like one of the most important things you do is learn how to write.
Yeah.
Like actually physically write on a piece of paper.
Exactly. Oh, well, handwriting is
Yeah.
gone.
But when was the last time?
Yeah, exactly.
So handwriting has become.
There are benefits of that, and now they're bringing like some fancy private schools and stuff are bringing it into the curriculum. Yeah, because they've got looked at the readers.
That's another thing that went away, right? Like when the computer came, like I don't write anything by hand anymore. Maybe I'll take some notes, but if I showed you some of my notes, I mean, we have intelligent.
And you lose it. Like my ability to do so. I did all my exams up until the very last year exam at university, handwritten, and after that, never wrote by hand. And I feel like my handwriting was already terrible because I was a boy. Boys always have terrible handwriting, and then it just now, if I try to write something by hand, I can't. You have to send a physical letter. Like we live in a third world country here in Britain. We still, when we have government business, you have to do it by snail mail. You try to write something on that envelope, you're like, why is my M 4 times the size of my capital A? Because you don't know how to write anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I can't even do my signature anymore. It's terrible. So, but that's one of those things that's just completely gone away, right? And I think some of these simple tasks will probably be replaced by machines just doing the thinking and the reasoning for people.
Yeah.
And kids growing up as AI natives today are I don't know. I don't even know what it's going to.
But are they though? I guess that's also.
Well, you have a son that's like a year and a half, right? Almost 2.
Yeah, well, but here's the thing: AI natives, you say, like they will be digitally native and they will know how to use the user end of all this stuff. My point is, I guess that the actual benefits, but by benefits, I guess I mean money, power, all those things that people for some reason crave. All of those will be centralized to 17 people, and I don't think the kids of today will be, in that sense, native to this stuff. They will be end users.
Consumers.
Yeah, consumers and end users, and not like that's the native, like being fluent and native at this stuff.
Yeah,
would have to study.
They'll as a consumer, they'll use these tools from the day they get to school or the day they have access to a machine.
Yeah,
and imagine how our schooling experience would have been changed, like if you had access to a language model. I mean, kids now, I can just go into ChatGPT or Gemini or one of these things and say, write me a paper about the Japanese economic miracle.
I
wrote after.
I actually focused and listened at school. My languages are still stronger than all of the language models in each of them. So I'm not worried about the kids who are actually paying attention. They'll still be all right, but they might just have to pay attention to some kind of robot.
Yeah.
Which might be,
or they might have some type of implant in their brain
that's the thing,
consumes everything that around them and makes
there's none of that, like
no brain implants.
None of this scary technology shit is coming into our house. If he, as an adult, thinks he's going to be left behind if he doesn't have that stuff, then do what you want. I believe there will be a strong countercurrent of people. Like, look at what's being consumed on YouTube. Look at the amount of views people get on a video where they just go into the woods and sleep a night alone in the woods and watch the stars.
I watch that.
People me too, because that's what we crave as well. Yeah. Like I'm saying, we have this insatiable appetite for progress and solving problems. I guess humans are problem solvers, just like our chimp ancestors who get a stick and they shove it in the termite mound. We just have a little AI stick that we shove it into, I don't know whose mound, but someone's mound.
It's a new tool. It's just a new tool.
Yeah. So
humans have created tools since
the
beginning of existence.
But we also, that same human ancestor who came from the stick shoving chimp also lived primarily outdoors, exercised a lot, ate very differently, and lived in communities that look very different than we do. So what we evolved from, I guess, but then again, that's the past and the very far past. So we always have our eyes set to the future. We're going to maybe, I don't know, become a different species after all the implants are put in and all that.
Yeah.
Who knows how we'll be classified after that, but
Well, this goes to that whole, sapiens thing about are we actually better off as a society based on the progress, the technological innovation progress that we've made? And what Harari argues is that we're not, right? That we're actually the least happy that we've ever been in the history of our existence.
He means urbanized Western folks for the most part, right?
No, I think, Yes, people that live in, say,
Yeah.
mainstream society.
Yeah.
Not that mainstream society is only urbanized Western folks. I don't know. I think he's talking generally.
Stop fearing lawsuits.
Wait. I think he's talking generally about human population. The tribal councils aren't coming for you, man. We are like the least happy that we've been in our existence.
Yeah.
And that's because of technology. Like, I can do so much more today, but has that productivity made me happier? It just means that I output more. But like, I actually work longer and harder than I ever have.
Yeah.
To increase that productivity and output.
Yeah. I guess real lack of access to education. And like when I said there'll be helpless end users of this stuff and have no access to the riches and progress that it will make somewhere else in the world, that's not us. Like there'll be entire countries that will probably only be end users and they'll have no income from this or anything, right?
Well, I think as long as you have access to an internet connection, like that's changing. You look at what Musk is doing with like Starlink and, enabling
hero Elon Musk.
Oh, I would first to say he's my hero. I mean, he's an interesting guy,
but interesting personality. Yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, yeah, he's a bit eccentric, isn't he? But,
you mean he's ugly and his talk's weird. Well, that's how I describe him. He's a very unpleasant man to look and listen to. I think he's done some impressive things in his life, but he's not pleasant to look and listen to.
He's very eccentric.
Yeah, I can't deal with his. He gives me the heebie-jeebies, the creeps. I can't look at his face or, by the way, this is all, everyone out there, this is all just for engagement. Danny eviscerates Elon Musk. You won't believe what Danny said about Elon.
Host this podcast and let him respond to it.
No, the title of this thing won't even mention you or any other topics. It'll just be listen to this evisceration of
Elon Musk.
Yeah.
It exists for like 8 seconds, 94 minutes into the podcast.
No, that's just my personal opinion and the opinion of all my employers, past and present, that he's been unpleasant man to look at and listen to. Yeah, don't care otherwise. Yeah,
I mean he's definitely a character. But you could say like a lot of the things he's doing are quite interesting. Like with Starlink will enable populations that never had access to internet to have access to internet. I mean, maybe everybody in the world is not going to have access to the resources needed to like be one of the 17, but you will be able to, like, there's this ongoing joke in Silicon Valley. It's not a joke, it's a bet between like Sam Altman, Elon.
Yeah.
And the bet is when are they going to see the first company that has $1 billion valuation with just one employee because of AI.
Yeah.
So like you can be the CEO, you can be the CMO.
I have no physical address. Like,
you're just
cloud.
You're basically you're a company with one person doing the function of 300.
Well, we're thinking it might be this one.
It could be.
Yeah.
But
we're thinking it might be this very outlet might be the first.
We should. Yeah, you need to start using.
We're going for $1 million evaluation at Sharks Den just for us two sitting here. Our total net worth.
Like we've gone.
Yeah.
We've skyrocketed.
Yeah, exactly. I think you are literally worth $1 million at least, and then me.
No, nowhere near.
And then I'm here too.
Yeah, but no industry.
So next I want to go. I know we are going on all kinds of tangents. That's because this is a pilot episode. The thing is, like, you will learn more, and we'll listen back to this and go like, there's so many things we didn't ask you, and I should have said this, should have said that. Doesn't matter. You can come back when this podcast is, obviously, then you'll need an agent and you'll have to pay, and there's we'll be at the top floor of a Trump Tower and all that. You're going to have to get past security.
But I'll have my list of questions you can't ask.
Exactly. Yeah. But I wanted to go into a different direction, which is how this stuff, because we were talking about, there are the people who make it. There are the little companies that come with innovation and they spin off out of university departments and then they get bought out by big ones. And at some point, the money comes from abroad. And it comes from primarily a few countries that will also eviscerate just for engagement, just for the algorithm will say China, Saudi Arabia, maybe
Yeah.
something like that. Yeah.
They have lots of capital in both
So
countries.
let's just say this stuff is impressive technology, and just like with with all other impressive technology, we haven't willy-nilly just sold it or given it to our adversary. And by I'm saying we're just talking as Western people, generic adversaries of the West, whether you're British or American, or I know we have 2 listeners from the Cayman Islands. You know, there are money guys. Yeah, sitting there chuckling. Yeah,
Whatever the people in the Swiss free ports as well. So
yeah. So
guarding the art.
So what is that seems to me both stupid and dangerous and irresponsible. And why are we allowing any of this knowledge and technology and the skills go with the humans. You can't stop them from moving to the Chinese company. But why are we selling the actual companies? Like, why is it allowed?
So this is a really nuanced topic.
Yeah.
I mean, you just saw, right? So I think AI, most companies in the West, or like, my experience with AI is working with American technology companies, British and European technology companies. So, but what's really important is like creating systems that adhere to a certain set of principles. And who establishes those principles is I think what's important to talk about. And, I think in the early days of AI, it was basically companies policing themselves, saying, we're going to build AI that's accountable to humans, is meant to do good, and is aligned to human interest. And it should not be used in applications, that could potentially harm people. And I think, not that these countries are doing that, but I think that, like, that's one side, is like that the companies should police themselves. And now you're starting to see all kinds of government regulation on AI, especially on the trade side of things. So, like, for example, Biden just introduced this AI Diffusion Act, which basically said that you can't sell and disseminate.
Don't worry, people often get those two confused. Yeah.
Well, it happened right at the end.
Yeah, no, go ahead. Sorry.
So it was like Biden's last executive order that he put in place right before he left office. It was this AI Diffusion Act, which basically puts controls on the types and the amount of things that you can export, AI technologies that you can export, and maybe I should say AI systems. So like the infrastructure, the software, all of it that can be exported to specific countries.
Seems like a better late than never kind of move.
Yeah, but now, and then Trump is starting to, he's announced this $500 billion investment that will have, that the U.S. government will make in AI. And so I think every country will have like what they call sovereign AI. And I think there need to be some types of controls to make sure that bad actors they're not necessarily just countries, they can be people too, right? That bad actors won't have access to this. But I think this is the argument that the open source community makes, is that, these bad actors will eventually get access to these technologies anyways. So is it better that everybody has access?
Are we conflating two threats there? It's like bad actors on the one hand is like moral argument, like what should be allowed to be said and what should these models be allowed to put out, all that, like from I don't know, let's talk maybe incitement to hatred or racism, things like that. And then actual sort of threats to our security and survival, if we view the world as competing poles of interest and resource and all that,
Yeah, I mean, I think, again, every country will be using AI as part of their, defense industry.
Yeah.
So the extreme could be, you compare it to like nuclear warheads or nuclear technology.
Yeah.
Where there's so strict and stringent controls on it that it can't be disseminated around the world and is subject to like massive controls. I don't know that like AI systems are that dangerous yet as nuclear weapons, but they can be used. Like it can definitely be used in defense applications.
But I think they would never let. Just from my knowledge, I'm a nerd about following sort of defense logistics stuff, and like I know how many of certain jets are in production and how many short we are of annual targets and so forth.
Yeah.
Not by heart, but I can dig it up quickly. But what I know is that currently sort of Air Force chiefs and big generals don't even want to hear about autonomous aircraft that would be making decisions on their own. They want a human in the loop because this is a bad idea. For example, it opens you to threats of another person being able to command it completely.
Take over the machine.
Yeah. And so they definitely aren't going to put, I hope, like autonomous AI anywhere near nuclear weapons and making decisions.
No, but I was using it as an example, like controls. So I mean, there should be some type of controls on it. I think every country is going to have, just like, we have the arms race, maybe there'll be the AI race.
There is one, yeah.
And I don't think we have answers to what to do for it yet.
But well, we have one answer is to you said Biden did something like this, like you put a little
controls in place.
Little controls into how big a percentage of Western IP that might be imperative to, I don't know, call it national security is the American word, or call it just survival, planet Earth, like how much of it can be sold
but I think
to people who don't have our interests in mind.
But I think part of the problem with this is that, like, so there's two things to me. Innovation is happening everywhere. And I think generally when you don't restrict innovation across different borders, like the world as a whole is going to benefit by lots of different people tackling the same problem from different spaces. So like, I do believe that people should be able to work on and build things. But I also think if you restrict, like, these things are not only used to do harm, right? And if you start restricting these technologies, like I mentioned, we talked about earlier, that this is going to be like this paradigm shift, just like the Industrial Revolution. It's going to change the way we work. And all of a sudden you're going to start having economies that don't have access to the same AI technology that other economies do have access to. And you're going to start creating these pockets, like you're going to have this redistribution of wealth, and you're going to have economies that are much more productive, have a much more productive workforce, are able to focus on different things. And you're going to have individual people, right, that can like do things. And so if you start restricting it like in a blanket way, well, all of a sudden you're now, like we talked about people, being able to be one of the 17, like you're just going to keep concentrating that power within the 17, and you're not going to enable people like that don't have access to this to be as productive, or to have the opportunity that people that do have access to it. So I think there's lots of, like, you can think about it on the defense side, but these are not purely systems.
So here the example would be that if a new innovation in a smaller startup AI company has a $2 billion idea, and the investors that come in are, let's say, Saudi or Chinese or Russian or whatever money we might be worried about and how that money is controlled, the option is that only two companies in their own country could afford to do it. And
think about it in the healthcare space too, right? So like if you start controlling, like if we're able to make some massive breakthrough in AI that enables doctors to use AI to improve patient outcomes by like 150% or something, and then all of a sudden, in the rest of the world, they don't have access to this technology. So I think like you can't like blanketly restrict. Like I think just like I used to work for the U.S. Department of Commerce. It was my first job.
All right. Well, that's a good spot for an ad, actually. Before on that cliffhanger, this next segment is brought to you by the United States federal government, and I'm sure we will never be sued for that. There you go.
Well, and again, not the opinion of the.
This is the opinion of the Department of Commerce. Yeah. Currently held. Yeah.
No, but so like my first job in college, like we talked about, we didn't do manual labor. My first job was sitting in front of a phone and answering questions about the U.S. Export Administration regulations, and that was it's called the EAR, and the Export Administration regulations govern the export of U.S. technology abroad. And when you were sending something abroad, like everything required an export license. And so I think like as an AI system, what the Americans will probably do is they'll break the technology down into different components and classifications so that you can export things that are not deemed to be unsafe. I think like blanketly like they did it with encryption. So I remember when I was like, there were very specific export controls for technology that included encryption because they didn't want people to have access to U.S. encryption technology so that they could decrypt it.
Yeah.
So like, I think we'll get more nuanced and you'll have different classifications. Like, you know, a language model is software and could be exported. But, you know, what this AI Diffusion Act has done is it's basically said, we're not going to allow the Americans to export GPUs or other, you know, it could be Google TPUs, like any accelerated AI infrastructure to specific countries. And they put the countries in different tiers. So like you had tier 1, tier 2, tier 3.
Yeah.
So yeah. So I think like a blanket saying you can't have a computer because you're going to do a bad thing with it.
Yeah. No, exactly.
But so I just think we haven't figured it out.
No, but the same way we're worried about any other resource be concentrated in certain countries that aren't friendly to us.
I don't think anybody disagrees. Like there needs to be governance.
Yeah.
There needs to be regulation. I think we're just still figuring out what that needs to be. And
yeah. Well, we can wrap up here. So we'll just go straight into like one ending statement. Your public service announcement could be how people should think about AI, like 2 sentences, like don't get left behind, get on the train, you know, or something.
Well, I would just go back to say what I said at the beginning is that like AI is not going to replace jobs, but you might lose your job to somebody that knows how to use AI better than you do. So I think like as a startup point, so people should learn how to engage and use it and don't look at it as a threat.
Yeah.
Made that like right now, the intent is that it helps us. And there's all the naysayers out there that say the world will end soon, but we don't want to end with that. But I think right now, that's what I would say is learn about these things, take the opportunity to use them and play around with them, get conversant with them. And yeah, you'll be in a much better place.
Okay. And that's all that Matt's employers have authorized him to say today. And we've been recording on the 25th of January, 2025. And I'll say, welcome home to those who have returned and drive carefully to those who are on the way.
Yeah.
That's a professional ending, Matt.